Alrighty.
All right. So we're here just to talk about some of the work that we've done over the last couple years. To start off, how do you feel you have grown the most as an educator since we started working together?
Well, I think since we've been meeting, the transition from content-based learning to skills-based learning has been paramount, in my opinion. Since we adopted C3, and since you've been working with me on the intentionality of my lessons, I think I've really tried to shift away from, the direct teaching where I feed them dates and names, and my assessments kind of ask them to regurgitate that information back to me. Now it's more of like the document-based questions or those C3 inquiries, and that's just really changed how my classroom works, because before I would focus way more on the direct teaching and on the content, and that was like my objective was the content. Now I feel like my objective is the skill of writing a document-based question, coming up with a good thesis, analyzing evidence, and the content is more of like the vector, but my focus has just shifted to the skill. And I think besides that, and we haven't really worked on this between you and me, but my embrace of technology I think has been sort of upgraded in the past couple years, especially using Twitter. I love using Twitter as either kind of a do now or an exit ticket. And then my Google My Maps idea, which I'm so obsessed with. I think I've effectively used that as a way to take notes and as a way for the kids to have multiple experiences while they're learning history. Multiple, what's the word I'm trying to look for? The way in which they learn the information is not just one-sided. There's multiple facets. They're hit with, uploading a picture, and they're hit with the geography and having to place the point somewhere. So I think through those multiple associations, they're able to learn the content better. I feel like I've implemented that, especially this year to sort of a new level. And then lastly, I think, especially using the 9th grade feedback that we got, I think my classroom management has gotten better. I think I've been warm with the kids always. They always enjoy being in my classes. And I know my content, and that is, I think, essential for having good classroom management, because if you don't know what you're talking about and the kids know that you're not, you don't really know your content that well, I think that's the biggest thing where they'll start goofing off. But if you really understand it and you captivate them in the knowledge, they'll buy into it and go along with you. But certain little instructional strategies that I've tweaked for the 9th graders, simple things like seating charts, really adhering to a seating chart, or when I pair the kids, I'm a little more intentional of how I pair them instead of just group up however you want. Those sort of little tweaks I feel have helped out my classroom management. So I think kind of those areas have improved the most.
Okay. You touched a little bit on direct teaching.
Yes.
But I feel as though you still do direct instruction.
Yes.
So how does that look different in your classroom now?
It looks different because the way I have framed it is within the skills-based. My intentionality is towards the skill. So even though I may still have direct teaching moments, I'm telling the kids that this content that we're learning is all in service of answering the document-based question, or coming up with a good thesis, or analyzing the evidence. So I think of it as more of, okay, you got to memorize these dates and names and then give that back to me on the assessment. I think of the direct teaching as more of a scaffold for showing me the skill later on. Mm-hmm. Because what I love about skills-based learning is you still have to know the information. If I give you a question, what were the causes of the French Revolution, and you have to write an argumentative essay on it. Well, the skill is to come up with a good thesis and maybe a counterclaim and analyze the documents I give you. That's what I'm assessing you on. But in order to answer that question, it's inevitable that you're going to have to bring up dates and names and concepts. So it's I guess it happens anyway, but it's just framed in a different way, and I feel like the kids understand it better when I focus more on the skill.
So I've been in a few times to collect feedback from your kids. A, they love you and think that you're like super passionate about history, which you are. B, they feel relaxed in your room. And C, there seems to be a high level of learning awareness. What kinds of things have you adjusted based on their feedback?
Yeah, well, thank you for the compliment, just right out. I think that is a strength of mine. I have really good rapport with the kids, in my opinion. I think you've seen, that's something that, using the feedback has kind of affirmed that. Like, I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to continue being passionate about talking about history. And I think that really ropes in the kids, and that's a strength of mine. But what have I adjusted, using your stop, start, continue feedback? I think one of the big things that we looked at is the variety of summative assessments. One of the problems with writing as a summative is that it's so individual. It's your essay, it's your thesis, and the kids were constantly saying, "Mister, it's too many DBQs. We need to have some sort of like group work or some sort of assessment that's a little more just different from writing." And so I think this year, especially in 9th grade, I've done a lot more like leveraging technology again, using YouTube videos as instead of writing, they do a YouTube video collaboratively or by themselves, creating websites, even doing a skit, something like that, where it just gives them a little bit of a break from the traditional writing, which is the most important assessment, and I still have to focus on that a lot, and I'm never gonna get away from that wholly, but I just try to give these little moments of change for the kids where they're either grouped together, and they have these maybe unique ways of displaying the information. And then the other thing, I try to give them more variety. I think this year we focused a lot on, okay, well, the skill is the skill. It doesn't really matter necessarily what the content is. So if I'm covering, World War II and we don't hit all the content, I might have them do a YouTube video and then have a list of options that they can choose from, and then that adds kind of an element of choice. Or they can propose their own options. I've been more flexible with that. Where sometimes with the DBQs, it can be like, this is our question, we're working towards this, and this is what you're gonna have to write about. Sometimes I kind of like to change it up and present on what you want to present about. And then we're still hitting a skill, like, okay, presentation skills and your ability to, show that you're a good presenter and use nonverbal, whatever it is. So, yeah.
You've touched on this briefly, but let's talk a little bit more about your assessment practices. How have they changed over the last, few months even?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of the things I already touched on, but just in general, the move towards C3, which is our new framework, and throwing the multiple choice in the trash can, getting away from the content. Just the intentionality of an inquiry of a DBQ, and I think lately, I was doing DBQs in the past, but now they're more frequent, and the thing that we've really adjusted, especially in modern world history, is, okay, I'll teach you how to do a DBQ in the beginning. We'll practice a few DBQs or C3 inquiries, which are basically the same thing as a DBQ. But eventually I want the kids to, and this is kind of the point of C3, is to sort of come up with your own DBQ. And the C3 likes to talk about it as like a compelling question, and coming up with your own supporting questions, and finding your own evidence on, if it's a high-level secondary source on EBSCOhost or, a primary source. I think that's the biggest thing that's changed for us, like putting it another level higher. Okay, you're good at writing, you're good at creating a thesis, you can analyze evidence, but it's all the questions and evidence that I've been giving you. Now kind of like authentically create that yourself. I think that's the biggest adjustment that we've done. The other thing, I think, since I've been a part of the CAT team, Mr. Burns and I have done a good job of, I don't know what the word for it is, and maybe you can help me here, but like scaffolding it by grade level, these skills. Like, okay, we have the C3, we know that they have to write persuasively and, create their own inquiries, but how do we like scaffold that over from 9th grade to 12th grade?
Right.
Because before it was kind of jumbled. Like you may see this in Modern World, you may get that in an AP course, but 9th grade we never did anything related to persuasive writing or inquiries. Now Burns and I have done a good job of like, okay, we're starting the DBQ skills in 9th grade. And they may not be designing their own inquiries yet, but we'll kind of take it slow. First, you're writing a paragraph. You're going to focus on the thesis. Then we're going to focus on the evidence.
Right.
You're only going to use 3 pieces of evidence, just one small paragraph. Okay, we master that. Now we kind of upgrade to a DBQ in the 2nd semester. We perfect the DBQ. Then by 10th grade, you're already coming in with the skills of how to write persuasively and to have a thesis. And by the end of 10th grade, I expect you to create your own inquiry now.
Right.
And same thing in US history. Like I'm already pricing in that you can do this. So let's use higher level secondary sources that are peer reviewed on EBSCO and continue making your own inquiry. So I think that scaffold process has kind of been upgraded this year. We've really been intentional in the history department of watching that transition, from K all the way through 12. But
Right.
really for me, the important thing is like 9 through 12. And that's really affected my formative assessments too. Like it's not just the summatives. Like if you, since we've gone towards the C3, like all my formative assessments used to be content-based quizzes. Like, okay, we memorized stuff on the French Revolution, little formative assessment, do a matching or do a multiple choice, or maybe write a tiny little blurb of what caused the French Revolution or something like that. But since we're practicing more on the skills and since I've been more intentional with my lessons, now the formative assessments are all the information that they're doing there, or the skills that they're practicing in the formative are going to be used in the summative. So it's all kind of scaffolded out now, for the end result, and it's not content-based. So
Right.
I guess it's like all changed pretty much.
Yeah. I'm remembering a conversation. Well, it was a collaborative meeting that you were having with Maka and Monica, and you were looking at your atlas, and I think that you had some kind of an assessment that you used with the kids, but when you really like broke down the content and skills and we're looking at the alignment, you kind of all had this moment of like, wait, this doesn't even fit. Like,
Right.
Why would we do this? Why did we have the kids do it, or why would we continue to do it? So I can see that intentionality is playing out, in your classroom, but also in the planning that you're doing with your partners.
And it's classic backwards design too. Like if you know that this is going to be the end result, this is our inquiry that we're going for, well, duh, all the formative assessments that lead up to it need to be, scaffolded as such.
So
And-
kid needs to know what to do next.
Right. So we're going to maybe practice a little mini thesis on this thing, or we're going to create a Venn diagram and organize our, pros and cons, and then that's all going to play into the essay eventually. So, like I said, as before, it would just be, okay, what content did you know, and let me just check if right now you kind of know that content, so we can
Right.
keep rolling on with more content.
So you talked really briefly about your U.S. history class, which
Yeah.
I think has always had a bit of an interesting challenge because it's
Yeah.
always been a small class, and it's always had a lot of diversity as far as like ability, language, cultural differences.
Yeah.
So what have you done within your instruction to kind of meet the needs of that group?
Yeah.
Or those groups?
It's been by far my toughest class, as far as like instructional strategies go, because what works with 20 kids, when you reduce it to 5 or 6, it feels weird when you try to use those same strategies. My classic kind of formula, I love to sort of introduce an inquiry or introduce a topic, maybe do a little bit of direct teaching, then kind of go towards to like independent practice, guided practice. I kind of follow that traditional, like lesson plan strategy. What I've had to do is kind of get rid of some of the direct teaching and almost flip the classroom a little bit and make it more Socratic. Because if there's only 5 of us, it's going to be weird if I'm standing up there at the front and you guys are just in the first row in front of me, right? It just feels awkward.
Yeah.
So what I try to do now is, okay, I may give you some slides, I may give you some reading to do at home. Then when we come to class, you're prepared with the information, and we're gonna do it more discussion style. I feel like it works so much better with those small sizes to just have a little bit of like a round table, and almost sort of like a college discussion, where you've already, where you've already done the lecture, you already understood the content. Now you're sort of with your small group discussion, and we're attacking the inquiry, we're attacking the question, or we're talking about, we're kind of arguing, we're practicing arguing on a small scale. And that has really worked for me. The other thing with the international diversity and the ability types, thank God only 5 kids with that makeup, because I can really give them individual attention. I think that's how I've differentiated is as you're coming up with your own research and your own questions, with 5 kids in a 2-hour block, I can pull you aside for 30 minutes. And knowing your, background in my class and your ability on the skills, I can give you a little mini lesson and help you with your thesis. Or if you're struggling with finding evidence, okay, like you and me together for 20 minutes, let's practice putting in keywords into EBSCOhost and, finding high-level sources. So just that individual attention has worked wonders, because you might be here and the other kid might be there. And when I have that 20 with you, I can bring you up, or I can do whatever I want. And the last thing is just kind of like independent study. I asked my kids for those 5 students, like, what do you want to learn for this second semester? My last class, we went over the textbook and the chapters, and I was like, all right, guys, what are you interested in? Like, do you want to spend more time on the closing of the West, or are you really into the 20s? Like, what do you want to do? And then, since we've already practiced those skills for writing, my U.S. history class is I force them to, kind of think like a historian and come up with their own research questions, their own compelling and supporting questions, and find evidence. So it's very like college level in that sense, where we're all kind of doing what we want to do. Now that comes at certain times. I don't do that all the time, but definitely at the end of the semester, I try to, err more to those types of things, where you're creating an inquiry on, Cherokee basket weaving in the antebellum period, or something like that, real narrow in focus. And I think the kids like that, because, you're really interested in it. We're still practicing the same skill, and it's a real dive deep down. So. Nice. Yeah.
So you've talked a lot about intentionality, and you feel like you're shifting towards more intentionality. Biggest takeaway?
That it's just more logical for the student. Like, it's not some moving target. I'm not feeding you content and it's some mystery that's going to come on the exam. It just feels very logical for the student. We start the class for the Industrial Revolution. I give you the skill that we're going to be working on for this kind of entire, like where we're going. I give you the content objective where we're going, and I'm reminding you about it every single day. We're going to do formative assessments answering the question every single day. So by the time we actually get to the assessment, it's like there are no surprises. It's like all knowledge is public. So I just feel for the student, it's easier. They're like, Mister, it's so clear. Like that is what we are doing. There's no mystery to it. So I think it's just effective for the kid to know where they're going.
Right. So I have been quoted as saying that you are one of the most coachable teachers at ASFM. Why?
Thank you. To tell you the truth, I think it's because I'm young. I think it's because I'm new to the game of teaching.
Maybe.
Like, I've only been teaching for 3 years, so I don't feel like I'm jaded in my ways, and I've been in the game for 10 years, and I think I know what I'm doing, and I'm not going to change it, right? I'm so new that all these strategies that are being thrown at me, like, whatever, I'll try it out. I'll do something. You tell me, you have experience. I'll roll with it for a little bit. So, really, I think it's because I'm kind of green. I'll try out whatever and see if it works.
I think, though, one of the things that sets you apart is that you try it out, but you also reflect on the impact. I think a lot of people try out all these different strategies because they're like high yield strategies or what everybody's doing.
Yeah.
But I think one of your strengths is that you really kind of say, recognize when it works and maybe when it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I would add that to your answer.
And I think to give you credit, that's where, like, I've been working with you so much. We spend time talking about this and doing those stop, start, continue reflections with the students.
Right.
And then analyzing the data and talking about it and like planning forward using that. So,
Right.
yeah,
All right. Good job.
thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that was good.